My father claimed I stole cash from his safe and threw me out. I was completely cut off afterwards. Have you ever had your own father frame you for a crime, kick you out, and then spend a decade lying to everyone you know? Well, that's my story. And it all started because of $20,000 and a hidden note that finally set me free. I was 19, still living at home, still naive enough to believe that family meant unconditional support. The kind of naive you only shed when life smacks you hard across the face. We lived in a perfectly average suburban neighborhood, lawns trimmed, neighbors waving more out of habit than warmth. Our house had 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, and a garage my dad locked like it held state secrets, even though it was mostly just old tools. My parents had been married for 22 years, but the last 5 were nothing but simmering arguments and cold shoulders. I'd learned to sleep with earbuds in, drowning out the tension. Dad was intense, not physically abusive, but stern in a way that made everything feel like a test. He had this permanent scowl, like even breathing wrong would earn you a lecture on respect. He worked in commercial real estate, carried himself like a man who'd clawed his way up and despised anyone who hadn't. Money was sacred. Loyalty, his version of it, was too. He constantly reminded my older brother, Aaron, and me that everything we had came from his sacrifices. My mom, Evelyn, was the buffer. Not weak, just tired. That deep, bone-weary exhaustion from years of trying to keep peace in a war zone. Aaron was the golden child. Football captain, scholarship student, charming. He could do no wrong. Me, I was the quiet one. Decent grades, part-time at a bookstore, kept to myself. I never caused trouble. I just wasn't impressive. I remember the day everything shifted, like it was yesterday, early spring, a week after my 19th birthday. I just walked in for my shift, the weather finally warming up, when I saw Dad pacing in the kitchen, jaw clenched, eyes wild. I'd barely had time to drop my backpack before he turned on me. "Where is it?" he barked. I blinked. "Where's what?" "My cash. The $20,000 I had in the safe. It's gone." I thought he was joking. $20,000? That was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. "You had $20,000 just sitting in a safe?" I asked, bewildered. "Don't play dumb," he growled, stepping closer. "I know it was you. You're the only one who knew the combination besides me." I stood there, stunned. I had no idea he kept that kind of money in the house, much less that it was missing. "I didn't take anything, Dad, I swear." He didn't even hesitate. Liar. The word hit me harder than it should have. Not because it was the first time he'd accused me, but because this time I saw it in his eyes. He meant it. He truly believed I had stolen from him. Mom rushed in, confused, panicked. "What's going on?" "He stole $20,000 from the safe." Dad said flatly, pointing at me like I was some criminal caught red-handed. "What? Christopher would never." "Don't defend him, Evelyn. The money's gone, and he's the only one who had access. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out." Aaron showed up a few minutes later. He looked between us, confused, then said nothing. Not a single word. Just stood next to Dad with that same skeptical look he always gave me. I tried to defend myself. I begged him to listen. I offered to let them check my room, my bank account, everything. But it didn't matter. Dad had already decided I was guilty. Mom didn't say much after that. She just looked defeated, like something inside her had finally broken. Aaron stayed silent, and that silence, it was worse than anything else. That night, Dad told me to pack my things and leave. I wasn't welcome under his roof anymore. I had nowhere to go. I hadn't even started college yet. My savings were pitiful. I'd never even looked into apartments because I assumed I'd be home for at least another year. But none of that mattered. Within 24 hours, I was out. I spent the first 2 weeks crashing on a co-worker's couch, trying not to cry every time I looked at my phone. Not because I expected Dad to apologize. I knew better. But because Mom hadn't called. Aaron hadn't texted. No one reached out. I felt like a ghost. And then the rumors started. Extended family, friends of the family, even a few people from my old high school. "I heard you stole from your dad." What happened with the money? I didn't think you were like that. I realized then that Dad hadn't just kicked me out. He'd scorched the earth behind me. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family event, I was the elephant in the room who wasn't invited. And if I was mentioned, it was with a shake of the head and a story about how I'd chosen a different path. I tried to move on. I really did. I worked, saved, enrolled in community college, then a state school. Got a degree in digital media. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I built a life, made friends. I learned how to carry the weight of being the family disappointment. And yet, no matter how far I got, the ache never fully left. I'd hear about Aaron getting engaged or see pictures of family gatherings online, always missing one face, and it would hit me all over again. The unfairness, the betrayal, the fact that I had been branded a thief by my own father, and no one had bothered to look deeper. It wasn't until 10 years later that the truth finally came out. Not from Dad, not from some dramatic confession or heartfelt apology. No, it came from a damn wall panel in the basement. Aaron and his wife had moved back in temporarily while their new house was being built. He decided to renovate the basement into a guest suite. A quick job, he thought. Drywall, flooring, paint. But during demolition, he found something tucked behind one of the panels. An envelope, old, dusty, sealed tight. Inside was $20,000 in cash. And a note in our father's handwriting. It read, "For safekeeping until the divorce is finalized. Hide well. Don't trust anyone, not even Evelyn." Aaron called me that same day. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 7 years. When I saw his name flash on my phone, my stomach dropped. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. His voice was quiet, hesitant. He told me what he'd found. Read me the note. I didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, I asked, so I wasn't lying after all? He let out this breath like he'd been holding it for years. "No, you weren't." And then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Dad wants to talk. He says he wants to move past this." That was the moment everything came crashing back. Not just the accusation, but the silence, the betrayal, the years of being erased. I didn't answer him right away, because I knew whatever came next, it wasn't going to be a simple conversation. And that's when the real story began. When I hung up the phone that night, I sat in my dark apartment for almost an hour without moving. No music, no distractions, just me and my thoughts. A wave of emotions I couldn't sort through fast enough. Rage, vindication, confusion. But most of all, something hollow. I wasn't celebrating being proven right. I was mourning the fact that it took 10 years for anyone to care. Aaron's voice still echoed in my ears. "Dad wants to talk. Talk like nothing happened." I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept replaying old scenes like a cursed slideshow. Dad with his finger in my face. Aaron watching silently as I packed. Mom not meeting my eyes as I walked out with 2 duffel bags and nowhere to go. The weeks afterward, my phone stayed silent. The people I called family didn't lift a finger to check if I was okay. And now he wanted to move past this. The next day, I got another call, this time from my mom. It was the first time I'd heard her voice since I sent a card for her birthday 5 years earlier. No reply, no thank you, just silence. And now, suddenly, here she was. "Christopher," she said softly, "Aaron told me what he found. We didn't know." I didn't say anything. I let the silence hang. "I should have believed you," she whispered. That sentence didn't land the way she thought it would. It wasn't a salve. It was a shovel, digging up everything I'd buried. Her silence, all those years, hadn't been neutral. It had been a choice. She had chosen comfort, chosen to preserve Dad's ego over defending me. "I lost 10 years of my family," I said finally, "because no one believed me." "I know, and I'm so sorry. Your father, he thought you'd been sneaking around the house at night. He was under a lot of stress from the divorce and—" "No," I cut in. "Don't make excuses for him." There was a pause, then a quiet, "He wants to apologize." "Did he say that, or are you hoping I'll make it easier for everyone?" She didn't answer. I didn't hang up, but I ended the call quickly. My mind was spinning. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with all this. There was no roadmap for what to do when your family suddenly remembers you exist. A few days passed. I ignored 2 more calls from Aaron and 1 from my dad. Then a text. Dad, I made mistakes. Let's talk, please. I stared at it for a long time. I wish I could say I didn't care anymore, that I'd moved on, built a better life, and wasn't affected. But that would be a lie. I did care. Deeply. Too deeply. The text opened wounds I thought had scarred over. So, after a week of debating, I agreed to meet. We chose a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our places. Aaron came too. I hadn't seen either of them in almost a decade. Dad looked older, thinner. His hair had gone almost completely gray, and the deep lines around his eyes looked like they'd been carved from guilt. Aaron looked mostly the same, though his posture was more cautious, less confident. When I walked in, they both stood up, unsure whether to shake my hand or hug me. I just sat. No one spoke for a moment. Then Dad cleared his throat. You look well. I said nothing. He tried again. I know I don't deserve to ask this, but I'd like to say I'm sorry. His voice was tight, controlled, like he'd rehearsed this. I finally looked up. Sorry for what? He blinked. For accusing you. For throwing you out. For not believing you. That's a start, I said. But it's not everything, is it? Aaron looked uncomfortable, shifted in his seat. Dad exhaled slowly. I was going through a lot back then. Your mother and I... Stop, I said sharply. Don't blame the divorce. Don't deflect. You told everyone I was a thief. You burned every bridge I had. You made sure no one would take my side. I didn't just lose a home. I lost my entire family. Dad stared at the table. I thought you'd taken the money, he said finally. I panicked. I was angry. I wanted someone to blame. So you picked your son? I picked the one who wasn't Aaron, he muttered. It was the first time he'd admitted it out loud. The golden child. The quiet one. It had always been that way. Aaron leaned forward. I should have said something back then. I knew it didn't make sense. You never lied, never stole, never even raised your voice. Then why didn't you defend me? I asked. He looked ashamed. Because it was easier not to. Because Dad had already made up his mind, and I didn't want to be next. There it was. Easier. That word hit me like a slap. Easier to abandon me than risk their own comfort. Easier to let me carry the weight of something I didn't do than confront the man who ruled over us like a dictator. Dad finally looked up. I know I messed up, but I want to fix this. I want to have a relationship again. I stared at his wrinkled face, the eyes that once looked at me with disgust, now pleading for forgiveness. You didn't just mess up, I said slowly. You ruined my life for years. You told every cousin, aunt, friend, and neighbor that I was a criminal. You never once questioned if you were wrong. He nodded, swallowing hard. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if I have to. The rest of his life. Like that was a check he could write. I didn't give him an answer. I just got up, said I needed time, and left. But the story didn't end there. Because 2 weeks later, I found out something that pushed everything past the point of no return. I was grabbing lunch with my cousin Rachel, one of the only family members who'd ever quietly messaged me over the years, even if it was rare. She'd heard about the discovery and wanted to catch up. It was the first time I'd seen her in person since I was 19. We were halfway through lunch when she said something that stopped me cold. You know, your dad told everyone he filed a police report. Back then. I froze. He what? Yeah, she said, frowning. He said he had to report the theft to the police for insurance reasons, that you were under investigation. I remember your mom freaking out about it. She said your name would be blacklisted forever. I stared at her. My hands felt numb. There had never been a police report, at least not one I knew of. When I got home, I did some digging. Called the precinct. Requested any records associated with my name from that year. And there it was. A report filed under my name, listing me as the primary suspect in a domestic theft of $20,000, signed by my father. I wasn't charged because there was no evidence, but it was there. A shadow that had followed me for years without me knowing. It explained why I'd been denied 2 scholarships. Why certain jobs never called back. Why? One landlord suddenly ghosted me after running a background check. He hadn't just thrown me out. He'd branded me. And never told me. Never apologized for that. Never rescinded it. The next time he called, I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail, chipper and casual, as if we were easing back into a relationship. Said he was thinking of having a little family dinner, that Aaron and his wife would be there, and Mom was excited to see me again. I sat there listening, seething. The man who destroyed my reputation, who left me broke, alone, and lied to everyone I ever cared about, was now planning dinners like we were some wholesome sitcom family. But he didn't know I knew about the report. He didn't know I was already calling lawyers. And he didn't know that this time, I would be the one writing the story. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to be quiet, strategic, and devastating. Because if they thought 10 years of silence was painful, they were about to learn what real consequences felt like. After I found that police report, something shifted inside me. Not just anger, though yes, there was plenty of that, but a deeper realization, the kind that forces you to see your life with new eyes. For 10 years, I thought the worst of it was the exile, the cold shoulders, the empty phone screen. But now I understood it had gone much further. My own father had deliberately planted a legal stain on my name, one that followed me silently through job applications, rental agreements, scholarships, and internships like a shadow I never knew I had. I stayed up that night, combing through every memory with a magnifying glass. That one internship I was shortlisted for and never heard back. The apartment application that was under review until suddenly it wasn't. The random questions on background checks that always caught me off guard. It all connected now. I hadn't just been let down, I had been sabotaged. The next morning, I printed out the police report and laid it flat on my kitchen table. I stared at it for a long time. It was surreal seeing my name under a list of suspects, with a signature from my father at the bottom like a final stamp of betrayal. No charges, no follow-up, just the existence of the accusation lodged into the system like a splinter. That's when I decided I wouldn't let this be the end of my story. I wasn't going to let a decade of silence and sabotage define me. But I also knew I needed to be strategic. I couldn't let my emotions steer the wheel. I'd done that before, and all it got me was heartbreak and isolation. This time, I'd move carefully, quietly like he did. I started with my own name. I requested every background check I could run on myself, paid for the full reports, and combed through them. Sure enough, that report came up again and again. No criminal record, but a flag in the system, a filed but uncharged domestic theft case tied to my name. I consulted with a lawyer, someone I found through a friend in the nonprofit sector. She was sharp, patient, and had this calm way of talking that made you feel like nothing was impossible. This is going to take time, she told me after reading the documents, but it's not irreversible. She explained the steps, a petition to expunge or seal the report, possibly a defamation case if we could prove malicious intent, especially since I was a minor when it happened. The statute of limitations would make that part tricky, but the emotional damage was real and potentially provable. In parallel, I started journaling. Not for a lawsuit. For me. For the first time in years, I let myself write down what happened. The night I was kicked out. The months I lived on a friend's couch. The job interviews where I smiled through my teeth, trying not to look desperate. The Christmas Eve I spent eating boxed mac and cheese, while scrolling through pictures of my family gathered around a tree without me. At first, the journaling felt awkward, then cathartic, then addictive. I didn't know it yet, but that journal would become the foundation of something far bigger. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding not just my name, but my sense of self. I poured my energy into work. At the time, I was freelancing as a video editor for small businesses and indie creators. The work was inconsistent but meaningful. I decided to rebrand myself. New portfolio, new pricing, new clients. I worked nights, weekends. Said yes to everything I could handle. For the first time in a long while, I started to feel useful. That summer, I took on a documentary editing project for a local filmmaker who was doing a piece on restorative justice. It was a small gig, not much money, but it lit something in me. Watching footage of people healing, confronting the past, reclaiming power. It hit close to home. I edited that project with everything I had. When it was done, the filmmaker thanked me profusely and passed my name along to a few colleagues. Within 2 months, I had a waiting list. Meanwhile, my lawyer made slow but steady progress. We filed the paperwork to request a copy of the full police report from back then. It took weeks, but when it arrived, it contained one crucial detail I hadn't seen before: a handwritten note from my father attached to the report. It read, "Christopher is a troubled kid. He's been acting out. This isn't the first time. I'm worried about what else he might do." My hands shook as I read it. He hadn't just accused me of theft. He'd painted me as a dangerous person to the police, to the system. There was nothing in my history to support that. No arrests, no school suspensions, no record of violence, or even a late homework assignment. He had invented a narrative, put it in writing, and sent it to the authorities like he was rewriting my biography out of spite. When I showed my lawyer, she sat back and folded her arms. "This changes things," she said. In the meantime, I continued rebuilding my life in small but meaningful ways. I moved into a better apartment. Not flashy, but clean, quiet, and entirely mine. I adopted a dog from a rescue, Milo, a scrappy little mutt with more personality than coordination. Every morning, we walked the same loop around the park, and every morning I felt a little more grounded. My social life grew, too. Not explosively, but enough. I reconnected with a few old friends, started saying yes to things I used to avoid: dinners, movies, even a short weekend trip. The loneliness I'd carried for so long began to thin out, replaced by something warmer. It was still hard to trust people, but I was trying. Professionally, things began to take off. My editing business grew. One of my clients, a motivational speaker with a decent following, offered me a long-term retainer contract. I started making decent money for the first time in my life. Not rich, not yet, but stable, independent. And then one night it happened. I got a message from Aaron. It was a screenshot of a Facebook post from my dad. The post was long, overly sentimental, and filled with half-truths. He talked about the power of forgiveness, how family bonds can heal with time, and how rebuilding bridges starts with honest conversations. It ended with a picture of us from when I was a kid, me sitting on his shoulders at a family barbecue, both of us laughing. I felt sick, not because he wanted to apologize, but because he wanted to control the narrative. He wasn't reaching out to me directly. He was performing for an audience, preemptively managing the optics. My stomach turned as I read the comments. "So glad you're reconnecting. Family is everything. Proud of you for taking the first step." And there it was again, that familiar feeling of being erased, rewritten. He wanted to be seen as the repentant father, brave enough to own his mistakes. But he hadn't told the world the truth. He hadn't admitted to the police report or the 10 years of abandonment or the smear campaign he ran behind my back. He wanted redemption without accountability. That was the moment I knew. I couldn't let this go quietly. I would not be vindictive, but I would not be silent. Not anymore. I pulled out the journal I'd been keeping and started typing. I poured every memory into a document. I didn't hold back. I didn't dramatize. I just told the truth. I included dates, details, screenshots, and documents carefully, methodically. I wasn't planning to post it yet. I wasn't sure where it would go, but writing it made me feel strong. And one night, as I sat reading through it, I realized something. He thought I was still 19, still quiet, still scared to rock the boat. But I wasn't. Not anymore. He thought his apology dinner and Facebook post would clean the slate. But I had built something stronger than approval. I had rebuilt myself. And soon, I would decide what to do with the truth. Because justice wasn't just about being believed. It was about being heard. And he was going to hear every word. I didn't write the post to go viral. That was never the point. When I started typing it, it was just for me. A letter I would never send. A truth I needed to get out of my chest so I could finally breathe. But as I edited it, as I scrolled through page after page of dates, screenshots, photos, and memories, something began to take shape. It wasn't just a rant. It was a record. A decade of silence documented. The kind of story that didn't need exaggeration because the truth was heavy enough. I titled it simply, 10 years ago, my father accused me of stealing $20,000. This week, My brother found the money behind a wall. I didn't post it. Not yet. But it sat there on my desktop, saved in 3 places: Google Docs, an external drive, and an encrypted backup. I wasn't going to let this one disappear. This time, I was the one in control. But I knew that before I made any moves, I needed to understand what my father had been doing all these years. I'd been focused on surviving, rebuilding, moving forward. But he'd had a decade to shape the narrative however he wanted. And if that Facebook post was any sign, he was already laying the groundwork for his redemption arc. So I started asking around. I reached out to Rachel again, the cousin who had warned me about the police report. She was cautious at first, not sure how much she should say, but once I promised to keep her name out of anything public, she started opening up. After you left, he told everyone it was just too painful to talk about, she said. He framed it like you had gone off the rails. Said he tried everything he could, but you refused to admit what you did. Then he kind of leaned into the idea that you were estranged by choice. By choice? I asked, incredulous. She nodded. He told Aunt Moran that you cut ties with the family, said you were angry about the divorce and took it out on everyone. I sat back in my chair, stunned. So I was the villain and the one who left? Yeah, she said gently. He made it sound like you just didn't want anything to do with the rest of us. I didn't even know what to say to that. The story I had lived through, the raw pain of being exiled, accused, abandoned, was being rewritten as teenage rebellion. But you believed me, I said quietly. Rachel smiled sadly. I always thought something didn't add up. But what could I do? Your dad made it very clear that asking questions wasn't welcome. And no one wanted to take sides. That phrase again, no one wanted to take sides. For 10 years, they'd all chosen neutrality. And in doing so, they chose him. But now, I wasn't alone anymore. Over the next few weeks, I reached out to more people. A few old family friends, a former neighbor, even my old high school counselor, Mrs. Harper, who had always been kind to me. To my surprise, a pattern began to emerge. My dad had done more than just accuse me. He'd waged a full-on campaign. He told our neighbors that I had been stealing little things for years. Told my uncle that I had a secret drug problem I was hiding from everyone. Told a church friend that I'd stolen from my mother's purse when I was 16, something that never happened. One person even recalled him, saying I'd forged his signature to get into his safe. Each lie was slightly different, but they all painted the same picture. I was dangerous, dishonest, untrustworthy. And he never once corrected any of it. He never came clean when the truth came out. He just shifted his strategy from defense to damage control. And that's when I realized something important. He didn't regret what he did. He regretted being caught. The family dinner, the Facebook post, the sudden warmth. It wasn't about healing. It was about optics. He wanted to control the fallout before it spread. He knew Aaron had told me the truth. He knew the police report still existed. He knew that his carefully built version of events was starting to crack. And now I held the hammer. So I began to plan. I wasn't going to scream at him. I wasn't going to show up at his house or stage some dramatic confrontation. That's not how he operated. He didn't scream. He didn't throw punches. He moved in whispers and rumors and quiet conversations behind closed doors. So I would beat him at his own game. The first step was legal. With the help of my lawyer, we filed a formal petition to have the police report sealed and removed from all publicly accessible databases. It would take time, but we had a solid case, especially with the discovery of the money and the note in his handwriting. Aaron was willing to sign a sworn statement confirming when and where he found it. The second step was personal. I drafted a letter to the family. Not emotional, not dramatic, just factual. I laid out what happened. The accusation, the report, the consequences. I included photos of the note Aaron found, a copy of the police report, and a brief message. I'm not writing this for sympathy. I'm writing it because for 10 years I lived with the consequences of a lie. I deserve the right to tell the truth. I didn't send it yet. I waited because the third step, the most important one, was the setup. I needed a moment of gathering, something public enough to make silence feel like complicity. And wouldn't you know it, that opportunity came gift-wrapped. Aaron's wife, Julia, was planning a baby shower for their first child. She invited the whole extended family, even me. At first, I thought about declining. I didn't want to taint their moment. But Aaron called me and insisted. "You should be there," he said. "Your family, no matter what he says." I agreed. On one condition, that Dad wouldn't be warned. Aaron hesitated. "Are you planning something?" "I'm planning the truth," I said. "Nothing more." The baby shower was set for mid-June. A picnic-style event at a local park, rented pavilion, catered food, the works. A lot of extended family planned to attend. People I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. People who still looked at me like a ghost when they saw me in public. I decided that would be the day I set the record straight. I printed 25 copies of my letter, stapled each one, neatly tucked them into a plain envelope marked, "Please read before leaving." Then I showed up. I didn't make a scene. I didn't bring up the past. I smiled, shook hands, congratulated Julia, brought a gift. I sat at a table with some cousins and made polite conversation. I helped stack plates when the wind picked up. My father was there, of course. He gave me a strange smile. He didn't approach, but he watched me like he was waiting for a bomb to drop. And near the end of the party, when people were beginning to gather their things, I quietly handed out the envelopes, one per family. I didn't say what it was. I just smiled and said, "Take this with you. Please read it when you have time." Some people opened them immediately. Others waited. But within 10 minutes, I saw the ripple begin. Eyes widened. Mouths fell open. People looked from the paper to my father, then back to me. He noticed. Of course he did. He started moving toward me, fast. His jaw was tight. His hands clenched. "What did you do?" he hissed. I didn't flinch. I told the truth. "This is a private matter." "No," I said. "You made it public the moment you told everyone I was a thief. You're trying to destroy this family." "No," I said. "I'm reclaiming my name." He looked like he wanted to explode, but the eyes on him stopped him. For once, he was the one under scrutiny. For once, the whispers weren't about me. I didn't stay long after that. I said goodbye to Julia and Aaron, hugged them, and walked away. Calm, steady, unshaken. That night, my inbox filled up with messages. Some were apologies. Some were shocked questions. Some were silent hearts or crying emojis. But every single one said the same thing. I had no idea. And that was the point. Not revenge, not rage. Recognition. The truth was out. But the fallout? That was still coming, and I wasn't done yet. The baby shower changed everything. Not instantly, not in some cinematic explosion of yelling and apologies, but in the quiet ripple effect way that truth always does. One envelope at a time, one conversation at a time. It spread not just among my extended family, but through the entire ecosystem my father had carefully built over the past decade. The neighbors, the old family friends, the church group he liked to boast about during Sunday coffee hour. Everyone who had heard his version of the story, that I was a selfish, ungrateful son who betrayed him and left the family, now had mine. In my own words, with receipts. But I wasn't done, because while emotional vindication was healing, there was still the matter of my name, legally and professionally. The sealed police report had been damaging in ways I was only just starting to understand. My lawyer had begun tracking down places where that incident might have silently interfered with opportunities. Internships that passed me over. Housing applications that mysteriously stalled. In one case, a small media company I'd applied to 5 years ago admitted off the record that a flagged background check was the reason they didn't move forward, even though my qualifications had stood out. We filed a formal request to have the report fully expunged and removed from all databases. That required testimony, documentation, and something more. A letter from my father recanting his accusation. I didn't ask him for it right away. I knew he wouldn't give it willingly, but I had a plan. After the baby shower, the calls started. Aunt Moran, Cousin Leo, even a family friend named Greg, who I hadn't seen since I was 17. Most were stunned. A few were apologetic. Some were defensive, not of me, but of their own silence. "Your dad never said anything about a note behind the wall," one of them said. "He told us you confessed." That hit me like a punch to the chest. I hadn't just been accused. I'd been fictionalized. My father had written a version of me that didn't even exist. A dishonest, manipulative boy who'd admitted to stealing and then stormed out in shame. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I knew what had to come next. I drafted one final message. Not to my family. To my father. A simple email. No emotion, no dramatics. Subject. Next steps. Dad, you know what you did, and now so does everyone else. But this isn't over. Attached is a statement that I need you to sign. A formal retraction of the accusation you made in 2015, including the note you left behind the wall. We will be submitting this along with the motion to have the police report fully sealed and removed. This is the bare minimum. If you refuse, we'll proceed without your cooperation. But that path will include a public defamation case, which I've already begun preparing with my lawyer. I've collected enough evidence, police documents, character statements, messages, sworn testimony, to make a very strong case. If this goes to court, the details will become public record. I don't want that, but I won't be your ghost anymore. You have 5 business days to respond. I didn't expect a reply, but 3 days later I got one. A single PDF. Signed. Dated. No apology. But it was done. We submitted the retraction with our petition. Within 3 weeks, the report was sealed permanently. Any trace of it was scrubbed from my background. Legally, professionally, digitally. It no longer existed. And with that, I had everything I needed. But I wasn't finished yet. The last part of my plan was quiet, intentional, permanent. I had spent the past year rebuilding my life, my career, and my identity. I had a portfolio full of successful projects, a growing roster of clients, and a reputation for precision and professionalism. But now, I wanted to use my voice for something more. I launched a podcast. Just a small one. No sponsors, no flashy intro. Just me, a microphone, and stories. Real stories. The first episode was titled, The Son Who Was Erased. I didn't use names. I didn't need to. I told my story from the day I was accused, to the couch I slept on, to the dog I adopted, to the wall panel in the basement. I included every beat of the journey. Not to shame anyone, but to show people what it's like to be cut out of your own family without a second thought. The episode went viral, not overnight, but slowly, one share at a time. People wrote in with their own stories, being accused, abandoned, misunderstood. Some told me they'd reached out to their siblings for the first time in years. Others said they'd finally stood up to a parent who had manipulated them for decades. I hadn't meant to become a voice for anyone else, but somehow I had. And that became the final act of my revenge. Being heard, not as a victim, not as a lost son, but as a man who rebuilt himself from ashes and turned betrayal into something meaningful. My father never responded to the podcast, but I heard through the grapevine that his church quietly removed him from the community outreach committee, that a few family friends stopped returning his calls, that his name wasn't quite as golden anymore. He didn't lose everything, but he lost control. And for a man like him, that's worse than losing money. I saw him once more, a few months later, by chance in the grocery store. He spotted me near the produce aisle. Our eyes locked for a second. He gave me a faint nod. I didn't nod back. I turned, paid for my groceries, and walked out into the bright afternoon without looking back. I didn't need anything else. Not his guilt. Not his apology. Not even his silence. Because I had something stronger. My truth. My voice. My life. So, tell me, have you ever had to fight to reclaim your own narrative? Or maybe you've experienced betrayal from someone you thought you could trust completely. Share your story in the comments below. I'm listening.